Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Monday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky, distressing updates on Jarred Vanderbilt. Will he be ready for the season when it starts? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always free. It's never behind a paywall, and Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 25,000 subscribers, all of whom are a little freaked out, Andy, about the potential lack of availability and lack of health for Jarred Vanderbilt, of course, who missed most of last season with a foot problem, and it's been a quiet offseason. And as we may have learned last week heading into the weekend, little too quiet. Do want to let everybody know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TVs. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Of course, Andy, we all saw how much we need NFL football in our lives. Again, this weekend, yesterday, it was wonderful to have it back. I made it about half of one game before I figured out how to get Red Zone back on my television. So I certainly sympathize with anybody out there looking for a way to get the Sunday Ticket. All right. So also, we've talked a lot, Andy, about the importance of Jarred Vanderbilt. We learned it last year in the worst ways possible. The Lakers really need Jarred Vanderbilt. We've talked about Jarred Vanderbilt this year, what it's going to be like, what could be different with Jarred Vanderbilt back. Throughout, though, you and I, we've sort of pointed out, quietly raised our hands, made a note that we actually haven't seen any of Jarred Vanderbilt over the offseason. There's been very little updating going on about how, and there have been
a Sparks game for what it's worth, and it was reported that he was walking normally, which I guess, given what we're about to get into, maybe reading too much into basic activities of a human being.
If we are worried about walking normally, we're a long way from the season.
I'm just saying. I don't remember who it was. I think it was Edwin Garcia from Silver Screen and Roll, either him or Jacob Root. I'm pretty sure it was someone from Silver Screen and Roll. But they pointed out that Vando attended a Sparks game at the Crypt, and according to whoever this reporter was, and again, I apologize for not giving full citation, Vando was walking with no discernible limp or grimacing or problems.
Great.
No
grimacing with every step.
There was no Sherpa involved. Right. He was doing it all by himself. He wasn't being
carried. He wasn't on one of those. He wasn't on a rascal.
Nope.
Making his way through the arena.
Nope. Doing it all by himself like a big boy.
We have noted, there have been still the only little drips and drabs that have come out, Vando's still rehabbing, which just doesn't sound like a big deal when it's in, June or July or stuff like that, still rehab. But, with that foot injury, he did not get a procedure during the year. He chose not to get a procedure in the offseason. And I'm not picking on him or the Lakers staff for choosing not to get surgery. I think, it is always a last resort. Nobody wants to get surgery. Good surgeons don't want to recommend surgery. And for an athlete, especially with your feet, you do want to try to figure out ways to not have yourself be operated on. That said, Andy, we've gotten as close to definitive information, if you were slightly concerned, as I have been all summer long, that the lack of news was not good. You were there firsthand to experience some fresh reporting on the state of Jarred Vanderbilt and his potential lack of availability going into the year.
Yeah, I'm reading a quote right now from Mike Bresnahan on Spectrum Sportsnet. They're the Lakers TV affiliate partner, broadcasts all their games. They also do a podcast, and Brez was on the podcast saying, quote, Vando is going to be interesting. I'm not sure he'll be ready for training camp or even preseason games. It's a foot injury. He opted not to have a procedure in season when he got hurt in February. So we'll see when he's ready to go. I don't have a lot of details on it. Regular season, different story. Hopefully he'll be ready by then, but nothing concrete on him yet. And Brez and I actually did access Lakers Sports, which is Spectrum Sportsnet's regular daily Lakers show. And he said the same thing during that. And for what it's worth, during commercial breaks, I asked Brez off the air, like, is anything else, like any sense of whatever? And he, even off camera, he was saying no real sense beyond what I'm saying now. The Lakers are keeping information very close to the vest, which is something we will also get into during this show because it is something of a recurrent theme when it comes to keeping media and fans in even the broadest of loops about what's going on with this team and health. But in any event, Brez did raise the possibility of Vando not being available for the season opener, maybe at the very least not being open for training camp, which is a very, very big deal for this team.
It's one of those, it's a huge deal. And it's one of these things where, you're talking about an injury that has lingered for a very long time. And, and it's his feet. It's not like a shoulder or a hand or an elbow or whatever. Like those are important body parts, Andy, but like foundationally, you got to have your feet if you're going to play NBA basketball. And there's nothing in there that says he's going to miss time, but it's the lack of knowing. Like there's nothing. What you want at this point is definitive, expected to be ready for training camp. Like that's what would make people feel better, and that they don't know that. What is it? Where are we? Like 3.5 weeks away from the start of things. Like that is really concerning. Again, it's not about casting blame. I mean, I'm sure he's trying, but it is from like where you think about where the Lakers were hoping to have internal improvement this year versus last year. I would say the biggest chunk of that pie is the availability of Jarred Vanderbilt. I don't think there's any single thing that, coming from last year to this year, whether it's guys getting better, injured players coming back. I do not think there is anything from that formula that is more important than Vando being healthy.
We've talked a lot about last season that in terms of breaking down where things went wrong during the course of the season, where things got more complicated than they should have been, more difficult than they should have been, a lot of the frustration that grew not just from fans towards Darvin Ham, but I think internally inside the front office towards Darvin Ham, and definitely from the players towards Darvin Ham, I think were decisions that Darvin made with the rotation that I think really began, like the center of it, the butterfly effect moving onward, was Jarred Vanderbilt not being available throughout training camp. He got hurt during the first preseason game. I think it began the cascading effects of Darvin overthinking certain things, digging his heels into other areas where he very clearly heard the criticism and didn't want to give into it, to say nothing about what it seemed like he was feeling inside the locker room. And the same lack of optionality that Darvin had, in fairness to Darvin, in terms of different things he could do defensively, different looks he can implement without having Jarred Vanderbilt there, those are the same things that JJ Redick will be faced with. And look, there are ways that he could handle it better. Like, for example, actually playing Max Christie, who is on this team. This is something actually JJ Redick talked about in an interview with Brez. Max Christie is, at least on paper, one of the few true two-way players on this team. Like, even if you don't think his ceiling is as high in either of the directions, offensively or defensively, as you hope he could be to become elite at either, he is somebody that has shown potential on both sides of the ball in a way some of the other more established players on this team, even more skilled players, have not. If you don't have Vanderbilt, there is just the D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves backcourt, talked about many times. For all of the potential they have offensively and the way those two play off each other offensively. Defensively, you hit a ceiling pretty hard without Vanderbilt being there. So it's going to present different issues for Redick, to say nothing about the rebounding you lose without Vando, the energy, the physicality. There's a lot Vanderbilt brings to this team that he's the only guy who provides it in one player.
Let's keep going through that, because that and the transparency issue that you're talking about is really important. Two things to talk about. How might the Lakers respond if they don't have access to Vanderbilt as the season begins, and why might they have been so quiet about it if he's not ready to go? All of that and more next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we've got something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. That is a great, great deal for just $5. You are getting your money back and then some. And then just with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And while you get ready to sign up, you can also start thinking about the 24-25 odds for the upcoming NBA season. As of this recording, the Lakers are 35-1 to win the title. Anthony Davis, 150-1 for MVP. Also 25-1 for Defensive Player of the Year. Dalton Knecht, 10-1 for Rookie of the Year. And Max Christie, 151 for Most Improved Player. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook.
Thanks again for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of the day. For your second, try the Locked On NBA podcast. Of course, no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed or entertained as the Locked On NBA podcast, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I think what you were talking about heading into the break is the key thing. And the Lakers have no great internal replacement for Vando. I think, Christie will help. But even in terms of, it is a question of, at least on the defensive side, is Dalton Knecht a step down? And as much as people picked on Taurean Prince last year, probably a more effective defender at this point than Knecht. At least it's fair to guess that he will be. Yeah. So you lose.
Dalton Knecht had issues guarding in summer league. So if he wasn't locking up dudes in that setting, I seriously doubt he's not going to be someone that you have to cover for when you're actually playing.
At least initially, he's a rookie. Like these are all things to be expected. Sure. And defense wasn't considered his forte coming out of college. It was more a question of, is he better on that side of the ball than maybe he gets credit for? Not, is he really, really good? So, the Lakers don't have an internal replacement for him, and they didn't do anything this offseason to mitigate that. There was the news that Cedi Osman, for example, was offered a training camp invite for the Lakers and decided not to, and went to play and signed a contract in Greece and whatever. And that's not a real loss for the Lakers, because Osman looked at their roster and said, there's too much stuff in here. They've got 15 guys. I'm not going to make the team. I'm just going to go take my contract. And Osman's not that good by NBA standards. But it's just sort of another reminder that the Lakers are locked into the roster that they have and have been that way throughout the summer. And while I can't say for sure that the lack of updating around Vanderbilt in the offseason is related to sort of the bad PR that would come from people knowing that Vanderbilt was hurt and the team not being able to really do anything about it from a player transaction standpoint. Those two things may not be directly related, because the Lakers have over the last few years been remarkably opaque when it comes to injury updates. It nonetheless is exactly the type of thing that fans would be like, well, go fix it. If he's not going to be able to play, you got to go do something, and would have made the voices louder this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, Chetty Osman would not have done anything to address the issues we're talking about with Vanderbilt. It's just more symbolic of
right. The roster is full.
Right. It's symbolic of being stuck. And before get more into that lack of transparency, like there are guys on this roster who can address certain things that we are talking about from Vanderbilt. Like we talked about the things Max Christie can do, albeit he's more limited in terms of sample size, and also he's more limited in size than Vanderbilt. So, as much as Christie is an outstanding rebounder for a guard, and he's got some degree of defensive versatility, he doesn't give you all of the stuff that you're going to get from Vanderbilt. Christian Wood, I think if he's in the rotation next year, can address a lot of the rebounding that the team lacked last year. His particularly on the defensive rebounding, he was quite good, but he's not going to give you all the optionality of Vanderbilt defensively. Like Cam Reddish, for all of his flaws, is actually a very good point of attack defender last year. But then there's all the other stuff Reddish doesn't do that you have to account for if he's on the floor. So I think part of what makes this so damaging, a big part with Vanderbilt, is just how much you lose in one player and how much mixing and matching you have to try to do in order to account for that absence. As far as the lack of transparency goes with Vanderbilt, like it does bear asking how we go from Vanderbilt being listed as available and dressed for Game 5 of the opening round against Denver to possibly not available for the opener months later. Like, was that always BS and just dressing the guy to try to make Mike Malone think about him being available? Was it all right, he's not really ready to play, but we want to have him available just as a true emergency? Like, it can't make this any worse, but he's not really truly anywhere close to being ready to go.
Right.
Was something mishandled in between? Was something miscommunicated? And then you think about some of the other things that went on over the last couple seasons. The saga of Gabe Vincent. You had Cam Reddish last year getting cleared for games, then barely being able to get through like a quarter or a half, getting shelled for a week or two, coming back, not being able to get through that game. You had Christian Wood going from healthy before the All-Star break to all of a sudden injured with like no explanation how he really got hurt. Jalen Hood's back surgery snuck up on everyone. The season before, like Kendrick Nunn, what the hell, man? Or 2 seasons ago, like that, when he basically missed the whole year. Like, there's just a complete lack of transparency from the Lakers about the health of their players. And we don't expect them to tell us everything, but you also don't expect them to tell us nothing. And for a franchise that is, Brian and I can say this because we've been around this team for a long time. We've been through different incarnations of their media relations, and we've worked with different, we worked in different media places that have different relationships with the team. So we've seen it from a lot of different directions. They are, quite frankly, paranoid about what gets said about them. They have rabbit ears as an organization, and they don't like media digging in. If you don't like media digging in, don't give them reasons like this, because the less it seems like you're being non-transparent about everything, then the less inclined media is going to be to believe you about stuff. And also, it just makes things sometimes look worse than maybe they are because people are left speculating about everything.
I think that's the big thing is it creates a lot of questions. And it's not, I mean, the way the Lakers behave about this stuff is not, I don't think, wildly different than a lot of other teams. Or teams like to give extraordinarily technical explanations for something. Like the Warriors are famous for this. He's missing from an avocallicular, the 7th metacarpal. They're like, what does that mean? And he was out indefinitely, but will be reevaluated. Like, so you're getting lots of information, but none of it's useful. And so you can approach this from a bunch of different directions. And I think the problem that the Lakers face, like most teams, is that it's really hard. Like, teams have stopped putting timelines on things, because if you say 4 to 6 weeks, and well, by fourth week, well, why isn't he back? It doesn't do the player any good either, because now people think the player's slow to heal or soft or any of these other things. It's not good for anybody. And if it turns out that it's an injury that's lingering, and they're not back at 6 weeks, then now what's wrong? Does the medical staff do something wrong, or is it just an injury that? So timelines don't help anyone, and you can't say we'll miss 4 to 16 weeks. Like you might as well just say he's going to be back when he's back. And I think, where the Lakers run into trouble is that the results haven't been very good, and the turnover has been pretty substantial. So I want to talk a little bit more about that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by BetterHelp. It's fall. The kids are all back in school. And while they will complain about classes and learning and homework, the reality is kids enjoy being challenged and learning about who they are, finding their passions. But it never feels like there's enough time to exercise intellectual curiosities as an adult. And even if there was enough time, you wouldn't know how to break through the walls that we all create for ourselves as adults. But therapy can help you learn about yourself and the ways to tap into the best version of yourself. I can speak with firsthand experience about how talking with a professional therapist helped me and my family during a really difficult period, figuring out compromises that don't leave everybody feeling unfulfilled or unheard. Therapy is a different experience for everyone. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible, suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
So, in the offseason, one of the moves the Lakers have made, they have done nothing in terms of the roster. But what they have done is changing, obviously, the coaching staff, but also the medical staff. They hired a new head of training and medical stuff and whatever, a fellow named Leroy Sims, I believe is his name. I don't know anything about him. Other than I used to work for the league, I think in a similar capacity. And, I don't know what the problem was with the previous group. I know a few years ago, they had Judy Say, and like they've just sort of had this, Marco Nunez ran the program for a little while. If you want to go back even more years, like they've had this sort of steady turnover of the medical staff that doesn't get as much attention as the coaching staff turnover and all these other things, but it is something that makes it. So there's just been a lack of results. I don't know if it's anybody's fault. I do not question injuries. I think most of these people are pretty competent in terms of what they do. Human physiology is complicated. Basketball is incredibly punishing at the NBA level on the body. And so it's like, I'm not a doctor, but I know from a fan standpoint, they look at all this stuff and be like, why can't they seem to get guys on the floor? Why do injuries seem to last a long time? Or why do they do such a bad job making you think somebody might be able to play when they turn out they can't? Now, I think Vanderbilt, with the example you were talking about before, his availability for Game 5 was total BS. I think he was on there to give Mike Malone, as you said, something to game plan for that they might spend extra time on, that they would never see. I think it was gamesmanship. At best, it was break glass in case of emergency, but I didn't think there was a prayer he was going to play in that game. So, that kind of thing happens. If they had better results, I think people would be more tolerant of, oh man, Vanderbilt's not healthy. That sucks. I wonder what, that really went on, because you have a medical staff and a coaching staff and a basketball staff that people believe in, with a player that everybody knows wants to play and will do whatever he can to get back on the floor. I don't think anybody's questioning Vanderbilt. So it's just a bad combination of stuff.
It's difficult too when players now, and this has become much, much more common in the current NBA as opposed to the NBA that you and I first began covering, which was in the mid 2000s. players have their own team.
Yeah.
And sometimes the information that the team is giving out I don't want to say conflicts with what's being diagnosed by a player's personal team, because I don't know what's being diagnosed there. But I do know from talking to people, there sometimes can be difficulties for the Lakers to ascertain exactly where
guys go see their own doctor. They go see this. You don't want to get ahead of a player. You don't want to put him in an awkward spot.
That is something, and so it's clear this is not uncommon to the Lakers. This is not specific to the Lakers. This is common around the league, particularly with superstar players, and the Lakers have at least two. It's funny when you were talking about the idea of...
Yeah, but before you start that, can I just say this? That thing, though, mitigates the big success that they had last year was LeBron and AD being available and staying on the floor and playing as many games as they did. But they don't get credit for that because LeBron and AD have the two most visible personal medical training guys.
Yeah.
Then I don't know if Jarred Vanderbilt has a team necessarily, but I do know LeBron does, and I do know AD does. I don't know if Gabe Vincent's got a team. So the lower you get on the pecking order, the more likely they are to be relying on the team staff and, training staff, doctors, and whatever. And those were the guys last year who were unavailable.
Yeah. But, in the case of Anthony Davis, who last year was pretty healthy, but, there's been injury issues with him for most of his time with the Lakers, and LeBron's had some of his own. I know from talking with people, there have been times where the Lakers have not felt exactly in the loop with what's going on with those two medically. But when you raise the question about how this stuff is communicated to fans and to media in ways that don't feel like something is wrong, I've always found it interesting that, when they say someone is out 4 to 6 weeks, why they never say at least 4 to 6 weeks, because that is in reality the assumption that it is at least 4 to 6 weeks. It is never considered 6 weeks max. We know this guy is going to be back. It's 4 to 6 weeks if everything goes as well as we hope that it does. I've always found it strange that they never phrase this stuff as at least 4 to 6 weeks, at least 2 months, where you just make it clear, don't expect anything before this time period, as opposed to creating a window where once you enter like the 4 weeks, it's dudes on the clock to get back on the court, or else something's gone horribly wrong. And again, this is not the Lakers.
Right.
This is a league thing. I've never understood it, though.
It's one of these things that it is a place where I have sympathy for teams. I think, but it's all related. Part of what makes fans suspicious about this stuff is Rob Pelinka under promises and over delivers with, we're not doing anything with the trade deadline. We're going to keep our powder dry. We got those extra 3 pick. We got an extra pick, and we're going to make some big noise in the summertime. And then the summertime comes around. And it's like, sorry, it's Apronville, man. Like you didn't know Apronville was coming. Like you knew, you can't. And Lakers fans are frustrated, and they're hard to please, and they're entitled, and all these things. And I mean a lot of these things in the best possible way, because they have really high standards, as well they should.
And they pay a lot of money if they go to see these games in person. Right, you're entitled to a good product. You pay a lot of money.
I mean, like I always say, like if you can go see LeBron, go with the understanding of you might have to, the same way people save up for Disneyland to take their family there for a vacation. It's like you're in for $300, $400, $500, $600, $700 or something like that. You're taking your family to a Laker game. It is not cheap. At least you can spend more than that if you want. I don't know how big your family is.
You don't have to try that hard.
Leave the lesser children at home. Leave the ones that don't deserve it at home. The ones that are least likely to take care of you in your old age, don't bring them. They don't deserve the Laker game. There is a sense from Lakers fans too often that there is a Charlie Brown, Lucy with the football thing, where you're just kind of being sold stuff. And I think that is just, there's a lack of trust in Pelinka. And sometimes it ebbs and flows. Sometimes people are more trusting, sometimes they're less. But overall, I would say he is not somebody like on the trust scale that fans believe in the same way that, Thunder fans are confident in Sam Presti and will just kind of go with what he says.
This is where, and I think to his credit, he's done less of this over the last couple seasons or so. But Pelinka began his tenure with very much a slick used car salesman, like basically a used car salesman who goes through a thesaurus every day and finds the most complicated words before addressing the media. Right. But there was a slickness to Rob Pelinka when he first broke on with, helping run the Lakers and then eventually taking over, that I think established a lot of his persona that even while, again, over the last couple of years, I think he's leaned on that stuff a lot less, which I think in the long run is smart. As the saying goes, you never make a second chance to make a first impression. And that's kind of where Rob is. There's the reason people often don't believe him is he doesn't present himself often with an air of true sincerity, even if he is being sincere.
Yeah,
he doesn't reek of sincerity.
And he's an agent.
Yes,
don't believe agents. And
no.
I don't think Rob is a bad human. I mean, he's
always been very nice to you and me.
Sure, and that is the most important thing. But I don't know. It is really tricky, and I don't want to denigrate players. I don't want to denigrate medical staffs for things that I don't know, because I don't know about what these injuries are. I don't know how they've been rehabbing. I don't know the exact advice they've been given. If it was wrong, would other teams have done it differently? A lot of this is just bad luck. Different players heal differently with different things. I do know that the results haven't been great, and Lakers fans are edgy anyway. And even if it's nobody's fault, the fact that we're now just sort of getting this sense again that I've been a little worried about all year, like all summer. I mentioned it a few times on the show.
Yeah.
Do need to see evidence that Vanderbilt can play.
Second Sparks game with that.
I mean, what if he's got to really hustle to his seats? Got to get there quick. It's just distressing because now everybody really understands how important Vando is to the lineup. Do want to thank everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of today. Go check out Locked On NBA next. You can find the link in the show notes. You don't even have to go searching and hit the Googler or anything like that. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And a reminder real quick, Lakers Talk on 710 ESPN, right. 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific time.
Tonight.
Hosting it.
Yep,
tonight.
All right.
It is every Monday unless preempted. I will be hosting that. You can call in 877-710-ESPN. We will be
call now. Get on hold now.
Do it.
Just
love
wait.
to hear from y'all.
Skip your job if you have to. Just wait on hold. All right. We will see everyone tomorrow.